This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Real Talkers, when's the last time you thought about up north? Like up north. It feels like Canadians are considering our Arctic sovereignty, our claim to that part of the planet, the significance of international threats more now than perhaps at any other time in Canada's history. You know, this nation has the world's longest Arctic coastline. Nearly 40% of Canada's landmass lies in the north, but as sea ice retreats and global powers are paying closer attention to that region for its shipping routes, obviously, for critical minerals, military value, and strategic positioning between North America, Europe, and Asia. Russia has dramatically expanded its Arctic military footprint. China calls itself a near-Arctic state. And even Canada's allies are increasingly focusing on the north. The question isn't whether the Arctic matters, it's whether or not Canada is prepared to defend it. Anne Shibata Casselman has spent months reporting on that question for Maclean's in a deeply reported feature, The Arctic Needs Defending, Canada Isn't Ready. As you're about to hear in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, Anne argues the biggest challenge isn't just militarily, it's whether Canada truly even understands what Arctic sovereignty really means. That's coming up in 30 seconds. Before we get there, we want to let you know this episode is happening with support from RapidX Financial. You know, the Bitcoin world moves fast, and your trust in an exchange can't be a gamble, and that's why we recommend RapidX Financial. This is a made-in-Alberta solution from the same entrepreneurs, the same team that's brought you those rapid cash ATMs over the past 25 years or so. There's three different ways that you can buy or sell Bitcoin, other crypto with RapidX Financial. You can find them, of course, with their over-the-counter desk. More details on their website. They've got those crypto ATMs, and then, of course, you can always use their secure online platform. That's the one I use at rapidxfinancial.com. Now, to get ahead of some of the questions you may have, I want to let you know this is secure. This is FinTrack registered, and it's non-custodial, meaning that you control your keys. That has to be the case, Real Talkers, when you're talking about crypto. When you sign on to rapidxfinancial.com and look into it, make sure you keep that promo code Ryan50 in mind. That's Ryan50, all one word. That's going to knock 50% off all of your fees for your online Interact e-transfer trades. Now, we're never going to tell you to buy Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin. That's a decision that only you can make. But if you are going to, we recommend that you use rapidxfinancial.com. Proud presenting sponsor of this episode of Real Talk. You know, from Anne Shibata Casselman's piece, you can read it on your own at macleans.ca. The headline, The Arctic Needs Defending, Canada Isn't Ready. Let's get into this story from the renowned science journalist who spent months digging into this story, including a trip up north, returning to Real Talk. It's a pleasure to see you, Anne Shibata Casselman. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was something I know that has been months in the making, and this story is one that you've been working on for a very long time. It's no wonder that more and more Canadians are paying attention to the Arctic, paying attention to Canada's Arctic sovereignty, paying attention to implications of Russian aggression or Chinese action, or even comments from the current president of the United States, Donald Trump. How did this story first get on your radar?
Essentially, my editor at Maclean's had been sort of I guess this even goes back further than a year ago to December of 2024. And he was just seeing all the headlines, all the talk around militarizing the Arctic. And so he sort of was like, we need a big piece on this. Can you sort of go off and do a bit of a fishing expedition to see if there's a story here? And so that sort of got the ball rolling. And as a Southern Canadian who was not very familiar with the Arctic, had not traveled to the Arctic in Canada, had never traveled to an Inuit community before. I mean, I was relatively ignorant. And so, when I first started making the calls to the people who are not ignorant, it sort of became clear to me from what they were saying that the security threats and I would say sort of the Arctic as Northerners and Inuit experience it is so different from the Arctic that's essentially portrayed to us here in the South through the news, through media, through perhaps a mix of ignorance and just sort of distance. And so this idea that in fact there are kind of these two Arctics that exist in Canada, the Arctic that's lived every day by the people who live there, call it home. It's their homeland. Without them, we would not have sovereignty. And the Arctic as Southern Canadians and I would say Ottawa, decision makers in Canada's South see it was actually quite damaging. And once you sort of start to peel the layers, it became clear that actually it wasn't just damaging in terms of, Canada, I would say, letting down its social contract with its Arctic citizens. It actually poses a national security threat, as CSIS has been coming out saying more and more, especially in the past 2 years. Essentially, Inuit socioeconomic inequality and the chasms of infrastructure deficits in the Arctic, in the North, pose an indirect national security threat to Canada because it essentially opens this door to foreign influence, to misinformation campaigns, disinformation campaigns, predatory economic investments from hostile rival states, mainly People's Republic of China, and to a certain degree, although not as much, it looks like Russia as well. So I think as a Southern Canadian, you see all these headlines around these Arctic exercises that National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces are doing in the North. Not to say that those aren't necessary, as everyone's saying, Canada needs to chew gum and walk at the same time. But the fact that, as we're finally reinvesting in this much needed defense infrastructure across the Inuit homeland, if Canada is not partnering with Inuit leadership to really bring those citizens into the rest of Canada, there's a giant sort of security vulnerability that can be exploited and actually there have been attempts to exploit it already.
You detail them in your piece, and I want to get into those. Lightning Rod is watching our live stream presented by California Closets. In our chat says, I took a red eye from the Arctic one time. We flew south for about 10 hours. Says Canada is huge. Two or three times already in this interview. The interview is in its infancy, Anne, and you've already said Southern Canadian a few times. And I'm taken aback just a tiny little bit because I don't know about you, but I never use that phrase. I very rarely hear anybody say that they are a Southern Canadian or they live in Canada's South. I should let people know you're joining us from the Lower Mainland, so I guess we use some of that vernacular. But is that a tell on me on how little I've been thinking of the Arctic, or maybe even how I frame or perceive Canada's landmass? Of course, the majority of Canada's population lives in the south of the country, but we don't really refer to it like that.
It's sort of mind-bending. Like for my piece, I visited the hamlet of Cambridge Bay, which is on the Northwest Passage in the Kitikmeot region. And I was fiddling around with Google Maps, and from Cambridge Bay, you're closer to Russia than you are to Ottawa. And so, yeah, there is a circumpolar perspective that I think Southern Canadians are just ignorant of. And, when you're on top of the world, like Vancouver is the south of Canada. I mean, probably even Yellowknife is south, right? And And it's funny, like the vastness gets mentioned a lot around the Arctic. And certainly geographically, that is true. It is an enormous, enormous region. I mean, the Cambridge Bay is on an island, Victoria Island, and I again was fiddling with sort of landmass and area. Um, and in this island, I think it's maybe the fifth largest island in all of Canada. Like all of England, Scotland, and Wales would fit into this island. Um, yeah, so I mean the scales are different. There is a different perspective, and certainly culturally a very different worldview from that part of Canada. And I guess I would just say, early on in my research, I was speaking to this one researcher who's worked in with Inuit communities for a very, very long time, especially looking at shipping traffic, shipping lanes, sea ice. And she said, she was like, it's so the Arctic is so beautiful. The culture is so incredible and warm, and there's nothing like it. And yet Canada sort of treats the North as its alley, like as its backyard, when it should really be reorienting the country to think of it as its front yard. And so, other Arctic nations do manage this. I think they do have the Arctic very strongly in their cultural identity and national lifeblood. And for whatever reason, Canada, I mean, our attention has sort of been to the south, to America mostly. Our trade has been oriented that way. Certainly now, I think if you look at, Carney's nation building projects, a lot of them are connecting Canada north to south, investments in the north. So there are hints that that's happening, but I do think that there is just, I don't know. It's almost like we need like Inuit embassies in southern Canadian cities. Like I was reading about how, of course, Canada has opened up an embassy in Greenland. But less than 1% of Canadians have traveled to Nunavut, lived in Nunavut alone. So you can see there's a huge gap there in terms of awareness, experience, um, understanding, I would say. And that lack of understanding absolutely runs through, I think, a lot of the bureaucracies of the federal government that do work in the North.
Kathy's checking in on our live chat powered by Park Power. She says, oh, talking to the people who live there every day and getting insight into their experience, unheard of, says Kathy. She goes on to say, Ryan, we do refer to people who live in the territories as Northern Canadians. So referring to everybody in those southern provinces as Southern Canadians, of course, makes perfect sense. Tracy says the Great North is beautiful. I'm so happy to think that we may once again invest in our northern security. Meantime, Erica says, Canada not being able to defend itself militarily. Yeah, no shit. How can anyone be surprised by this? Is there anybody who actually didn't know how weak and vulnerable we are? You're not necessarily talking about military threats to the Arctic. You're not talking about an invasion, really. At least that's not the spirit of your piece.
No, and I think because Canada is militarizing the Arctic, it's easy for people to assume that they're militarizing it against like the threat of a foreign invasion. But when you talk to experts, when you look at what National Defense is saying, Global Affairs Canada is saying, nobody is concerned about a foreign land invasion or any kind of military kinetic threat in the North. Um, the defense investments that we're making, a lot of them are to catch up our North American radar system so that it can actually detect the missiles that China and Russia now have. So long range missiles, hypersonic missiles. And at the moment, our the North Warning System, which is sort of like, I guess, the newer version of the dew line that was erected in the Cold War along our Arctic flank, is relatively obsolete. So there are a lot of things that need to be done. They're more, I would say, deterrence. And again, just to reiterate, like no one, I mean, no one, I can't say no one. no one I spoke to, and the experts, certainly amongst the experts, the idea of a foreign invasion in the Arctic is not what's on the table. So these days, the threats really are, the term is kind of hybrid or gray zone threats. You see this in Northern Europe on along NATO's eastern flank. You're looking at cyber threats, disinformation, info ops, predatory economic investments, trying to gain influence that way. Also, just kind of like just throwing spikes down on the road, right? Um, so Canada's fortunate, I would say our national sort of cybersecurity um, institution is really good at partnering with northern institutions to sort of detect cyber threats. Um, there was a rash of them, probably not a coincidence in the aftermath of Russia invading Ukraine. And then my understanding is that Canada's Cyber Center really mobilized quite proactively to work in the North and the Arctic to make sure that state-sponsored hackers, couldn't, let's say, shut down the Nunavut's energy supplier, Kulik Energy, like they did last year. I don't know if you have the co-op stores in Alberta, but certainly in the north, the co-op stores are everywhere. They are the grocery store, sort of the common denominator of grocery stores. And last year, the week before the Canada Day long weekend, there was a cyber attack on the co-op's distribution centers, which essentially meant that a lot of shelves were going bare, which in these remote communities is so significant. Again, no one was saying who was behind those attacks, but the fact that it was like before the Canada Day long weekend feels like, I mean, that feels like it's trying to make a point. So,
Did
anyways,
you
those are just a few of the threats that are actually happening.
you detail more in your piece, by the way, and we can get into this again. If you're just joining our live stream presented by California Closets, we're talking to Anne Shibata Casselman. You can read her piece. The Arctic needs defending. Canada isn't ready at Maclean's.ca. What was it, about 6 years ago? Chinese bots fomented social media opposition to a Canadian company that owns a uranium mining project that was in northern Saskatchewan, right?
Yep.
You write about Russian hackers launching cyber attacks on Hydro-Quebec and the ports of Montreal, Quebec City, and Halifax. You've talked about the energy supplier in Nunavut and more. You say that Canada, or let me not put words in your mouth. I understood you to say that your perception is that Canada is relatively well equipped and well partnered to manage these cyber attacks. But are we really? How do we know that? Like, is there any sense of how Canada stacks up to the rest of the world, or how well prepared we are for threats that the average Canadian may not even be aware of, but that could have devastating impact on infrastructure or folks' everyday lives?
Oh man. I mean, that's a really good question, and maybe there's a follow-up piece that I
Yeah.
do around cybersecurity. Um, so I did speak with a senior official, and this wasn't in the Maclean's feature because there was only so much that could go in, and it's pretty packed, full of nutrients and calories. However, I did speak with a senior official at this cyber center, and he was describing how, and you can see in their annual reports, essentially what they do is they work with, and again, they also work with private companies as well, who are often targets, and they don't really publicly name who those private companies are. Often the private companies just probably want to be under the radar, but they deploy what they call them sensors. And I am not a techie, but it's some sort of software that they can put on computers and networks that will detect attempted intrusions. And in some cases, it depends how hardened they want that cyber infrastructure to be. Sometimes that attempted intrusion will just alert IT that, someone's trying to get in. At other times, I think they can also deploy programs that will not just detect, but not let those threats enter into the system. Um, So yeah, I mean, it's sort of, not being a techie, it's impossible for me to know how effective they are. However, I will say a lot of the examples that I gave of those cyber attacks were sort of in 2022, 2023, in the aftermath of Russia invading Ukraine. And there were a lot of attacks in the north, it felt like. And I see less of them in the news now. So, and I know that the Cyber Center has been sending out their staff and personnel to territorial governments to sort of harden that infrastructure. So in terms of cyber, I actually think Canada's probably in better hands, for our size. I think we probably punch above our weight. Again, my understanding is that other sort of allied, let's just call them vaguely, maybe like NATO allied, similar like-minded middle power states, I think do look to Canada's cyber center's expertise as kind of like I don't want to say a model, but I think they're looking at some of the tools that Canada's developed to defend itself in the cyberspace. I mean, this is a bit of a digression, but I do think it's material, right? Because I think because of infrastructure deficits in the north, like a cyber attack on, let's say, an energy supplier or a territorial government, that means that they can't pay their staff. I mean, or a grocery store where there isn't a redundancy of other chains of grocery stores that someone can just get in their car and drive to access the groceries they need. So I think everything's sort of heightened when your infrastructure doesn't have those backups and that resiliency. And, think about, let's say, like a diesel generator in a community in the Arctic. There's just one diesel generator. There's no like additional energy supplier that people can go to. So the vulnerabilities, I think, are heightened through Canada's lack of investment into developing these areas.
If you're just joining our live stream presented by California Closets, we're talking to journalist Anne Shibata Casselman. She's got a piece out at Maclean's.ca. The Arctic needs defending. Canada isn't ready. Anne, want to press pause so you can top up your coffee. And when we come back, I want to ask you, what happens if we don't act on this? What happens if we lag? What happens if the Chinese or the Russians or the Americans expand their aim on the Arctic? We'll play the what if game. Plus, I want to talk about the infrastructure deficit. I want to talk about what Anne describes as an ethical travesty. She referenced the social contract earlier in this interview. Let's talk about what that means coming up on a year after Anne visited, or at least landed in Cambridge Bay, and then went from there in putting this long-form piece together. More with Anne Shibata Casselman in just a moment. Before we get there, I want to remind you that this show is happening with support from Athabasca University. That's Canada's open university. So whether you're checking in from Canada's north or southern Canada or somewhere in between, you're bound to find a fit with Athabasca University. Probably the biggest AU advantage is that as Canada's online university, you're not talking about a brick and mortar location. And that means that your class schedule, so to speak, is also going to look a little bit different. You work at your own pace. You work on your own schedule with what works best for you. You benefit from flexible study options and accessibility for students around the globe. You can apply now or learn more about student supports and the hundreds of programs and courses by visiting their website, athabascau.ca. Albertans are winning with Play Alberta because all revenue stays in Alberta. As a matter of fact, as the market, that iGaming market, is now open in Alberta, we want to remind you that Play Alberta is the only app that puts all revenue directly back into supporting programs and services that Albertans rely on every day. Play Alberta is also the only app with casino, sports, and lottery. And that's a huge convenience. So remember, whether you play, bet, or buy with casino, sports, or lottery, know that your fun is also making a difference across the province. You can visit playalberta.ca/realtalk to learn more. That's playalberta.ca/realtalk. Hey, coming up in just a few days from now is the Family Fun Day presented by the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 955. IUOE 955 proudly represents about 12,000 hardworking Albertans in diverse sectors of the economy, from oil and gas, construction and maintenance, crane and heavy equipment operation, renewable energy, healthcare, education, municipalities, and more. You could say they do it all. And IUOE 955 is always putting labor and workers' interests first. If you want to join them on their Family Fun Day, of course, you can check out the details that we've been sharing with you over the past little while. This is coming up on the 18th of July, 176th Street, 114th Avenue in the capital city from 11 to 3 p.m. You can find more details on the union itself. That's IUOE 955 by visiting joinustoday.ca. Speaking of renewables, speaking of future thinking, our friends at Kubi Energy reminding you that this is the time of year when Kubi customers are enjoying the biggest savings. But you know what? Contrary to what you may have heard in past, solar panels perform 12 months a year. That's right, the technology improvements, including the efficiency of those panels and the capability of those batteries when it comes to storage, means that solar customers are seeing benefits of going green 12 months a year. It's not too late to get solar installed on your home or business this summer. You can get a free quote today by visiting kubi.ca. That's kuby.ca. Kubi Energy is the proud presenting sponsor of the Real Talk Golf Classic. And before we get back to Anne, we want to remind you that BC cherries have arrived at Friesen Brothers across the province. Anne's eyes just lit up when she heard that. You know, Friesen Brothers is proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned, but they also know that the freshest and best possible produce is exactly what Friesen Brothers customers are looking for. And that's why they offer their BC guarantee. If you see cherries on the shelf this summer at Friesen Brothers, they guarantee they're from British Columbia. And it doesn't stop there. Keep your eye out for BC blueberries, apricots, nectarines, and more. You can learn about it by visiting Friesen.com. That's Freson.com, or pop into your local Friesen Brothers. Proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Anne Shibata Casselman joining us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Matthew's in our live chat right now. Says, you ever look at a map and notice the 1,000 or so islands up north? We say the waters that they dot are Canadian waters, but the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese say that they are not Canada's waters, despite the fact that our islands surround them. This means we wouldn't be able to control passenger and cargo ships that can or cannot traverse there, but would still be on the hook for any search and rescue, any cleanup that's needed, let alone be able to enforce our sovereignty. Matthew says we need a military presence to back up our Arctic sovereignty claim and to make them credible. You were up there. What do you think about that? An interesting note about shipping traffic from Matthew.
I think during the Harper years, there was a lot of talk and I would say concern from Canada in terms of its asserting the fact that the Northwest Passage is internal Canadian waters and not an international marine passageway. I think up until Trump was elected, there was sort of an understanding. I would say that Russia is not contesting the Northwest Passage. Neither is China. No one is saying that the waters are theirs, nor are they necessarily testing it. However, in testimony, Canadian officials have said, this was someone with Global Affairs Canada, that they have gamed out how Canada would respond were the US to send a ship through the Northwest Passage to test Canada's sovereignty of those waters. So, I mean, this official didn't say what the gaming out resulted in. Did it mean that Carney would just call up Trump and tell them to back off? I have no idea. I will say this idea that the Northwest Passage is opening up to become a major international shipping route is actually not being, it's not happening if you look at the data. So there's like this huge sort of myth debunking with the Northwest Passage. Everyone knows that the sea ice is melting, the sea ice is thinning, it's retreating. Ice cover is shrinking back more and more every year. I mean, dramatic warming in the north. However, almost counterintuitively, the Northwest Passage is actually becoming more dangerous to ship traffic. And that's because the thick multi-year ice that used to sort of freeze in place, um, and it sort of reminded me of in Game of Thrones, like, that like northern frozen wall. I mean, this is what I picture in my mind. This is not what it's like in reality, but I guess as a metaphor it works. So these ice bridges, these sort of giant frozen sheets of ice would hold back a lot of the ice from flowing into these narrow passageways. As the multi-year ice is breaking up, instead, all those little chunks of ice are flowing into passageways that they didn't go into before. And so, actually, ships now require more ice reinforcing to safely navigate the Northwest Passage than before, counterintuitively, even though it's warming. And if you look at the transit traffic in the Northwest Passage, it is very low. And it's actually, even in recent years, it's gone down. So transit traffic is defined as traffic that originates from outside of Canadian waters. It goes through the passage and exits out the other side back into international waters. And last year there were 10 transits. So 10 ships did that. Six of them were container like cargo ships, five of which came from Wagenborg, which is this, I believe it's a Dutch shipping company. A lot of them were also cruise ships, but that's only 10 ships. So it's not, I would say for the next several decades at least, the Northwest Passage is not going to be a very friendly place to shipping traffic. And sorry, and I should clarify, I'm talking about shipping traffic during sort of the summer open season. There is currently a moratorium on ice breaking in the Canadian Arctic along those passageways when there is ice cover, simply because animals and people use it as a highway, as a thoroughfare. So yeah, so it's actually not, the Northwest Passage is not going to become like the Panama Canal anytime soon. It's also incredibly shallow. I didn't appreciate this, but ships go aground on it all the time. And actually, because it is so sort of like gently shallow in parts, a lot of them seem to manage to just like unground themselves when the tide rises. It's not very well mapped outside of the shipping lanes, so it's not really a great option, I would say. What we are seeing, certainly along Russia's northern sea route, so this connects China to Europe across Russia's northern coast. That route definitely has much more traffic. It is melting and warming in a different way than the Canadian archipelago is. And even the cross-polar route, so even the route that simply just goes like literally over the North Pole from China to Europe, might actually be reliably more open in the near term relative to the Northwest Passage. I mean, this is getting into the weeds a bit, but of course, I don't want to underplay the fact that as the sea ice retreats, there is more and more interest in the Arctic. I mean, China is sending, last summer they had five of their dual purpose research vessels in working in the north. I think they're very interested in the seabeds to see what critical minerals are there. As we know, China's sort of the OPEC of critical minerals, which is globally, I would say, like a giant security vulnerability for the rest of us that need those critical minerals to like run our turbines, to run our missiles. I mean, you name it, anything that's sort of critical to having a secure modern life involves those minerals. And China is also interested in those shipping routes. So again, it's so hard to walk this line of it's almost like you need to hold these two realities in your head at the same time on any issue, I think, that I explored and learned about in my reporting. So, like, yes, the sea ice is retreating and melting, and it is opening up the Arctic Ocean writ large to more state actors, perhaps with geostrategic interests, with like mineral interests. However, the Canadian Arctic is sort of, it's not all the same, I guess I would say. And to that end, China has not sent a ship through the Northwest Passage since 2018. And even when they did that, they had to file, I think it's called like an MSR, a Marine Science Research application with Global Affairs Canada. Like there is bureaucracy that nations or states have to go through in order to send a ship through the Northwest Passage. And so far, they have all been honoring that. Russia, I don't think wants to really test Canada's sovereignty in the North because then that opens up Western states to test Russia's sovereignty of its Arctic, which it is very happy with. So yeah, it's hard to know. I do think America is a wild card. However, currently, America, I think, only has like one, certainly last summer, they only had like one working icebreaker. They've been signing contracts with countries to build up their polar fleet, but they just simply do not currently have the capacity that Canada does. Canada's ice-breaking polar fleet is the second largest in the world, second to Russia, which makes sense because we have the second largest Arctic coastline. So it's not like we're total chumps in this space. I mean, certainly there's room for improvement. And I think what I learned in my reporting is that if you want to catch up, if you want to sort of meet the moment and make those improvements, you need to really work. So like you need to be smart about it. You need to think way outside the box of what a normal federal bureaucracy, I think, typically thinks with its like checklists and really not necessarily always having your eye on the horizon. So you need to think in terms of dual purpose. I was chatting with Jim Landon from ATCO, who's looking at probably bidding on a lot of these defense contracts in the North and Arctic. And he was saying, with somewhere like Inuvik, which is going to see about $5 billion of procurement go out to build up essentially an Arctic air base for fighter jets. That defense infrastructure can't really be dual use. Like there's not a lot about it. An airport hangar for a fighter jet is not something that the community of Inuvik can necessarily use and enjoy and take advantage of. But he was saying, for the worker crews that go up to build this Arctic jet infrastructure, certainly that housing, instead of taking it down at the end of the build, what if they built that worker housing that's normally temporary to actually stay after the fact and provide community housing? Because housing is in such short supply in the North and Arctic, and it's so foundational. Overcrowding is a huge issue. And he was saying, but this, he basically was saying, I can see how this would be very, very smart to do, but it needs to be built into the procurement process so that bidders know that this is what national defense wants. They don't just want someone to erect temporary housing to house their workers to build, the fighter jet runways. They also want housing that can function long after the fact for community. So that's just sort of one example of how there are lots of opportunities to hit two birds with one stone. I think, unfortunately, the way our government is often set up, it's almost like those places where there are sort of double, win-wins or win-win-wins often do fall through the cracks of kind of departmental funding and departmental remits. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see how we do. the Canadian taxpayers are going to be spending so much money militarizing the North. But in the long term, it's not really going, I mean, it's important. How do you value that, right? Like, how do you value the value of deterrence? It's like the value of getting a vaccine. You don't know necessarily what infection it fended off. However, I think that if we're not really partnering with Northern and Arctic communities to figure out, okay, what are the needs that this community has so that the cost of their flights goes down, the cost of their freight goes down, the cost of the sea lifts that bring up, building supplies, trucks, machinery goes down to improve cost of living. All these things are so holistically intertwined in the North in a way that requires not just like a whole of government approach, but such a, I think, a really deep and functioning partnership with Inuit leadership and Northern communities. I think it's a test. I don't know if Canada, so far in its history, I don't think Canada's managed something like this. Um, we'll see how we do. But I mean, it's so important, right? Like, what is the use of having a radar system that can detect incoming missiles if at the same time, the citizens in these communities are so alienated and disenfranchised with Ottawa and sort of Canada as a country, that a disinformation campaign over Facebook, over social media can sort of sweep in and foment all this opposition to these projects, right? Like you have to do both at once. Otherwise, you have, your soft underbelly is really going to undermine everything else that you're doing to defend yourself as a country.
Yeah, for sure. You talking about just the reality of living up there and the housing challenges, and I know we're talking about different communities here, but time has flown since our conversation with Jordan Tutu, former National Hockey League star. That was back on October 11th of 2024. I'm showing it on my screen right now. People can Google that interview, how former NHLer Jordan Tutu saved his life. A very powerful conversation talking about his experience growing up in Rankin Inlet and some of the challenges that he faced and that his beloved community continues to face. We'll link to that episode in the show notes if people want to check it out. But there are some common themes, even in our live chat right now, powered by Park Power. Ambustion says we should bite the bullet and build better transportation infrastructure so that people can get up north more easily. You write in your piece, again, at Macleans.ca, people want to read it, Anne Shibata Casselman, our guest. You talked to Fred Peterson, who's the MLA for Cambridge Bay. And he said something very interesting about this community of about 6,600 people. He told you it's grown, but in a sense, it's also gone back in time. And he's not talking about a quaint back in time. He's not talking about people learning to churn their own butter or make their own sourdough bread. He's talking about services dissipating and disappearing and costs rising. And what did you notice firsthand in talking to people up there? I mean, what sticks with you to this day, like 11 months after you were up there?
I mean, the first thing is that the community was so welcoming and warm. Like the social fabric of that community was to sort of have a chance to be welcomed into it was incredible. The number one thing, you land on a short gravel airstrip. And this is the case for, like, I think maybe with the exception of one runway in Nunavut. They're all short gravel airstrips. And this is so kind of like boring. It's boring to a Southern Canadian because we all have like giant paved runways in our cities, centers, or regional hubs. But in the Kitikmeot region, where Cambridge Bay is, this is quite material. Like most people I spoke to when I was like, I'm reporting on security for Maclean's, they said like, we want a paved longer runway that can have jet service. So Air North, they used to have a jet that could land on gravel runways. They somehow like they couldn't procure the kits anymore. and they couldn't get the certifications with the newer jets. All this to say, the community went from having jet service, which it loved because with a jet, it's bigger, it's more efficient, flights are cheaper, and everyone flies. Like, this is how people access healthcare, healthcare specialists, women giving birth in Yellowknife, seeing family members in other communities. I mean, it's all through flight mostly. And so, yeah, like the flights are so expensive and it sort of boggles the mind. You're like, why? Like, surely there's something the Canadian government can do to work with these airlines to subsidize them or yeah, like let's just get this community jet service again. Because then all of a sudden, the produce that they fly in that's sold for like astronomical amounts in the grocery store also goes down.
Did you
Pedersen was,
Did you pop into a grocery store when you were there at all? Did you take a look at
yes,
some of the prices?
yes.
What would do you remember like the price of an individual item that the average real talker would be blown away by?
Yeah, so the thing, like there was a box of Pampers that I could get in Vancouver for like 27 bucks, 28 bucks. It was on sale for $51.
Jeez.
And actually, I mean, sort of the food basket costs in the community are at least 50% higher than in southern communities. There is a federal subsidy program called Nutrition North that does subsidize kind of staples, but everyone hates it. They really miss the old system. And I think actually Carney just announced after meeting with ITK president Natan Obed that they will re-examine Nutrition North. There was like a box of Cheerios, like family size box of Cheerios, almost $18. And these sort of, it's like hard to wrap your mind around these costs, but it's so like then you think about the costs. Pedersen had, I forget if it was a direct relative or a friend who had a pickup truck coming in on the sea lift from Montreal, and the cost of bringing up that pickup truck, $7,000, just added on top of the vehicle costs, right? And then there's the logistics of getting the truck from wherever you drive it off the lot to the port of Montreal so that it can get into the container.
Can I just like let me sprinkle in some interesting facts from your piece? I mean, people can read them right now at Macleans.ca, but a hamlet of 570 households, there's 160 families on the wait list for affordable housing. And you point something out, which I think is worth mentioning because it may fly under some of our radar. You say with the climate, outdoor homelessness is impossible as a matter of survival. And so you see circumstances where people are couch surfing or sharing mattresses. You describe 3 or 4 families living in one small residence. I mean, even the homes aren't on water and sewer lines, so they rely on tanks serviced by trucks. But as you detail in your piece, wildfires spreading across the Northwest Territories pulled those tank trucks away to help battle the wildfires, which meant that the community members that you're speaking with didn't even have access to water and sewage service. I mean, this is basic stuff and obviously hugely significant for these people in this community. But it's like, let's be honest, it's I don't speak on behalf of 35 million people, but this is not on the radar of the average Canadian. Like there's a real, I mean, I know it's kind of an indictment of a war. I mean, there's a real ignorance, myself included, around this. Do you see that as like more than problematic? Like, is it almost harmful in a way?
Yes. I mean, I do think it is harmful. And, like, so the cruise ships have a lot of traffic in these communities. And I was speaking to one ophthalmologist who they'd recently visited Pond Inlet and now they're in Cambridge Bay. And we were walking sort of along the road together and chatting. And I was curious about what she thought of what she was seeing visiting the North and sort of referencing the living conditions. This woman who's from North Vancouver basically was like, this is not talked about. Like, I did not know that that the sense of poverty was so significant to her that she was shocked. She was like, I'm going to go home and tell everybody I know about this. Like, we subsidize everything in Canada. Like, why can't we subsidize, having like a baseball field for the youth in this community, or paving, like developing their runway? And on, I would say, the community side of things, one young Inuk woman described the living conditions as third world. She was like, it feels like we are just simply overlooked by Canada. Um, and as a result, she sort of described how she sees families just simply being in survival mode, right? Like, you think about those basic needs of life, and like food, water, shelter, like those are the very bottom of the pyramid before you even get to things like fast internet, let's say, or, being able to buy affordable diapers that you can diaper your kids. Yeah, I mean, and I think that, speaking about the social contract, you know, I don't want to, I'm not suggesting that there's like an Inuit separatist movement, because there is not, as far as I could, like, everyone was so proud to be Canadian. But I also think that they are very aware of how things are different for them, if that makes sense. Like, one Inuk woman who was older, she said, I've lived in Edmonton, I've lived in Vancouver. It is not the same. Like, everything you take for granted, we have to fight tooth and nail for. And so you can imagine, if that is the case day after day, year after year, government to government, like, irrespective of who's in power, your faith in the country is going to be shattered. And that's one thing I imagine, especially with Alberta talk, like with all the sort of Alberta separatist talk. I mean, looking ahead 10, 20 years, this is something that Canada should be taking very seriously. And, the way to denature that poison is so simple. Like, also, it should just be on simple ethical grounds. Like, people in the Arctic are Canadians too. And the reason why the Arctic is Canadian is because of those people. So the fact that, there are these service and infrastructure deficits that do render living conditions third world is astonishing. And if we don't want to foment like an Inuit separatist movement 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, maybe we need to orient to the kinds of investments that we need to be making, that these communities are already advocating for so much, right? Like, it's not as if the Nunavut territorial government is not aware of the infrastructure deficits across the territory that their communities desperately want to have filled. So yeah,
I'm imagining what leadership in countless First Nations across the country would have to say about this as well, in tragically relatable fashion, right? Like, we are all here sharing this land, and yet the investments in infrastructure, I mean, in some cases, like the basic stuff, we're talking about like clean water, just aren't made. And whether that's because it's not politically convenient or politically advantageous, or whatever the case may be, if the average Canadian doesn't understand or perceive the value of the investment, there's probably a million different reasons. But the theme runs through, and it's a reality in present day Canada. I also think that it's worth mentioning, and I mean, you're alluding to it, and you write about it in your piece. But I mean, CSIS essentially has explicitly described Inuit inequity as a national security threat, and there has been evidence. Maybe you can tell us about this, but Northwest Territories Premier R.J. Simpson, just a couple of years ago, appearing on the Wonk podcast, describing how Chinese interests have approached communities in that territory, not a hypothetical, with offers to build infrastructure to get a foot in the door. This could be, or is happening now. That should be a wake-up call to Canadians, if nothing else.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is what's so fascinating, is because at this point, these two issues have sort of converged, right? Where geopolitically, circa 2026, having like 40% of Canada's northern landmass and the people and the communities there living with these deficits that us Southern Canadians all have and take for granted, it is a national security vulnerability. And yeah, I mean, just as an example, so in 2019, I don't know if you remember Huawei, the Chinese
Yeah.
telecom provider. And so they announced that they were partnering with a Canadian telecoms firm and an Inuit Development Corp to bring high-speed 4G LTE internet to northern communities. Um, of course, I mean, there are a lot of questions around this in terms of security threats. Like, is it in Canada's best interest to have Huawei installing internet infrastructure across these remote communities? And sure enough, 2 years later, CSIS was meeting with Inuit leadership and IT President Natan Obed, and warned Obed and his colleagues around the security vulnerabilities of, let's say, foreign investment in wanting to develop infrastructure, as well as foreign sort of sponsored Arctic science operations that might be gathering data. And then the year after that, the Canadian government essentially banned Huawei from operating. So that was dead in the water. However, it still meant that all these remote communities didn't have high speed internet, right? So, I mean, here they were, all of a sudden they have someone. It's a Chinese company, but whatever. Like, it means that they're going to get high-speed internet, which they desperately need. And not just for like scrolling Facebook and looking at YouTube, but if you have good data connections, all of a sudden you could have like remote doctor's appointments, and you can have educational training, and you can do remote study, right? Like, it opens up for remote communities. It opens up so many opportunities. So for security reasons, the Canadian government basically is like, no, we can't let you partner with the Chinese, but then they don't really pick up the slack and deliver high-speed internet to these communities themselves. And so what wound up happening was a lot of these communities went on to, individuals who can afford it started using Starlink, which unto itself also felt like a security vulnerability because, as has been reported by the New Yorker and the Wall Street Journal, like Elon Musk was in direct and regular phone contact with Vladimir Putin. And so finally, this year, 2026, so like 7 years after Huawei announced that it was going to bring high-speed internet to the North and Arctic and remote communities, the federal government has made an announcement that they are building up internet infrastructure, like satellite-delivered internet infrastructure, and that it will be completed by 2029. So like a full decade after Huawei was ready to step in and partner with Inuit, to deliver high-speed internet, that's the outcome that's going to happen. But it just sort of shows, yeah, like it sort of feels like an own goal in a way, if that makes sense, right? It's like, well, why couldn't Ottawa simply create, I don't know, incentivize or do something to partner with Inuit interests to make this happen without requiring a foreign, relatively sometimes hostile, sometimes not, state to come in and fix the problem for these communities. It's sort of crazy making.
And in our chat, Tweeting Trucker is watching our live stream presented by California Closet. Says, I was born and raised in Inuvik. What's being shared here by Anne is accurate. Unfortunately, the federal government and the general public is willfully ignorant of what conditions exist in the Arctic. Let's wrap with this, almost a call to action. Like, so what now? You've argued the case, you've set the table. I think you've given us a pretty clear understanding, at least as best you can in an hour. By the way, sorry for keeping you for an hour, but it's just been a really good conversation. We didn't ask Anne for an hour, by the way. But people are, this is an audience that takes action. This is an audience happy to place political pressure on their elected officials. This is an audience eager to learn more. What now?
Gosh. I mean, yeah, I think political pressure is a big one. And it's so hard because, the electorate, like Nunavut has one member of parliament. And yes, the population is very small, relatively speaking, but the strategic importance and relevancy of the region is so large. So yes, like let's get more MPs from the North and the Arctic for one. I think representation matters. And let's not forget that Lori Idlout, the Nunavut's MP, used to be with the NDP and then she crossed the floor over to Carney, right? So she herself might actually, who knows? I know Carney now has a majority, but I mean, these things matter. And yeah, I would just say, I think Canada writ large has progressed leaps and bounds in terms of reconciliation. And I will say this is just my personal opinion, but I don't think Canadians appreciate how different Indigenous cultures and communities are in the North and Arctic relative to maybe what our experience as non-Indigenous people is in the south of Canada. And so just to flag that, like in whatever job or role you have, if you are bringing in, let's say, local First Nations voices or engagement, I actually think that, we just simply need to orient to the North more and also learn about Inuit culture and values. Natan Obed shared this story of how it was last year and there was maybe it was the Cowichan case actually in my backyard here in south of Vancouver in Richmond. But he had some reporter ask him about some First Nations issue in Canada's South. And Obed was going, I'm Inuit. Like I have more in common with Greenlanders and the Sami than I do the First Nations. So I would just encourage everyone to bring in Northern and Arctic Indigenous voices, because I think it is just different. And I think a lot of, in our ignorance, I think non-Indigenous Canadians sort of lump in Indigenous issues in one big bucket. It's so much more complex than that. And in the North and Arctic, it's so different. Like these are communities that, despite experiencing horrible and still like resounding effects of colonization. I mean, I met an elder who was born out on the land. So because of its geography, these communities also have only recently started to experience colonization. I mean, 85% of Inuit still speak their Inuktitut or Inuit-Naktuan, right? Like that's remarkable. So I guess just to say, like, to flag the fact that we are so fortunate to have this culture and these communities not in our backyard, in our front yard. And so whatever, just to kind of reorient, just to flag that and to, put it on your radar. It's so much more than like a Cape Dorset beautiful print that's framed in the airport, right? Like there is such a unique richness in the North that so many Southern Canadians like myself, maybe you, Ryan, were so ignorant of. So that sounds kind of vague, but I think just sort of opening up a part of your brain to learning and being open to learning about this part of Canada and the people whose homeland it is would probably, it's like soft power, right? Like I think that would do a lot in the long run.
Anne Shibata Casselman is a award-winning journalist, author of the piece "The Arctic Needs Defending, Canada Isn't Ready." And of course, I should obviously mention that Anne is also a proud member of Real Talk's advisory board. And part of her duties are selecting the recipients of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship every single year. I can let you know I got an email just yesterday from Hani Bombewala, the first ever recipient of the scholarship, to let us know she's just passed her exams and she is now officially an RN. She's a registered nurse.
Amazing.
How cool is that?
Goosebumps.
How cool is that? I knew
gift.
you would love to hear that.
I love that.
Yeah, Hani joined us at the Real Talk Golf Classic on June 18th, whatever it was, I guess about 3 weeks ago. And she spoke at the dinner and just brought the house down. She's just a force of nature and incredible. She's obviously navigated a lot. She lost her dad to cancer. She's dealt with a lot of tragedy and difficulty in her life, but she's making a huge impact in the community around her. And I remember when we were going through her application for the scholarship, so I wanted to mention that to you in real time.
I love that. That's the best.
Yeah.
Oh, well done.
Yeah. Thank you for making time for us, Anne. I feel smarter every time I hear from you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, you got it. You can read Anne's piece at Maclean's.ca. Again, the Arctic Needs Defending, Canada Isn't Ready. And you can learn more about Anne's work, by the way. We'll link to this in the show notes as well, podcast and YouTube at annecasselman.com. You can link to her work. She's written for, in addition to Maclean's, The Walrus, National Geographic, Scientific American, Canadian Geographic, The Globe, Discover Magazine. Obviously, these are some of the world's foremost scientific publications. Her piece, Canada in the Year 2060, received the gold medal for long-form feature writing at the National Magazine Awards. I mean, time has flown, but if you check our archives, I'm going back to September 5th of 2023. So what's that, like 2.5 years ago? Look at that. Charles Adler was on that episode, and Anne joined us as well. The episode is titled Summers Lost, Biblical Floods, Political Turmoil. It was just a wake-up call of a conversation. This was Canada in the year 2060. That was September 5th of 2023 that she talked to us about that. And then that piece went on, as mentioned, to win that significant award. That was the gold medal for long-form feature writing at the National Magazine Awards. So a big shout-out to Anne. Real Talkers, you can let us know what you think about this. I want to get to some of your comments here in the live chat, those of you that are checking this out as we stream it. Most of you will hear this later. You can always leave a comment on YouTube. I think about 500 of you did yesterday with our most recent episode, talking about Jeff Rath, the separatist lawyer who had his assets frozen by the courts. A ton of comments in there, which is great to see. Good discussion, good dialogue. I mean, some of the comments obviously unhinged. It is the World Wide Web, but nonetheless, we want to hear from you. You can send us an email if you want to make sure that we see it, to talk@ryanjesperson.com. These conversations happen over time. We develop these thoughts over, in many cases, these discussions, days, weeks, months, years. And so you can contribute to that conversation and help the show better understand your perspective. Amazing to hear from Tweeting Trucker, as an example, says, I grew up there. Much of what Anne's saying is accurate. And here's what Canadians don't know. Here's what Canadians need to know. And then some of you like me, just learning in real time. I don't know enough about what life is like up there, not even close. I saw somebody in our chat saying I should have paid more attention in social studies class. Me too. But again, the world is quickly changing, and we seek to understand the implications of that, including threats on Canada's Arctic sovereignty, and I know that many of you have that. We'll dip into more of your comments, more of your thoughts on our conversation with Anne Shibata Casselman, but it is Wednesday, and every Wednesday, we pause. We step away from the news cycle for a second, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, to take a look at what's happening out in Jasper National Park. This is, as far as I'm concerned, the crown jewel of Canada's national parks, and, we're talking to you a lot about the vegetation, the flora, the fauna. Of course, we talk about Jasper, and how can you ignore that? Well, it is berry season right now, and that means that if you're lucky enough to be out in Jasper National Park this time of year, you're quite likely to see bears along bushy border trails, along roads, and even in campgrounds. Keep in mind, it is easy to surprise a bear that's focused on feeding. Now, surprising a bear is not a good thing. And so our friends at Tourism Jasper have a few tips to help you reduce your risk, and that includes making noise, right? Talking to your trail mates, singing songs, bear bells on your backpacks, whatever it is. You want to let the bears know that you're coming. They got to be able to hear you. You're also encouraged to carry bear spray at all times while you're out on Jasper trails. And if you do get, and I will say lucky enough to see a bear, keep in mind, you're encouraged to stay at least 100 meters away. Do not get out of your car if you see bears along the road. And there's a very good chance that you will. And obviously, never feed or bait bears. Now, this time of year, the summer season, is when wildlife are laser focused on eating as much as possible, and thus, they're a little bit more visible, right? They're out and about. And one of the unique things about Jasper compared to other nearby mountain towns is that it has a relatively lower elevation. And that means that Jasper has a slightly longer growing season. And so animals take advantage of that by chowing down en masse on all of the recently greened vegetation. Of course, they're working on fattening up for the winter ahead. Or as you're seeing from this incredible image that Johnny's showing us right now, if you're that wee moose, if you're that moose new to planet Earth, you're just working on bulking up, on growing, right? Now, animals spend much of their time feeding in the valley bottoms, and then again, beside roadways. The meadows are big, wetlands are huge, and then, of course, along the mountain slopes as well. Now, there's ways that you can safely check out the wildlife, and, well, I can't sit here and guarantee you're going to see something. I mean, we can basically guarantee you're going to see something incredible. And that is a wildlife tour that offers so much more than just transportation to wildlife hotspots. Guides out in Jasper combine years of local experience and knowledge, plus daily observations from other guides to quickly locate animals and interpret their behavior. They're all communicating together, and they understand how to do it the right way. So if there are bears about, or if there's moose or sheep or whatever it is that you're going to see on a typical wildlife tour, you're going to get the best possible experience. You're going to make the most of your Jasper adventure. You can expect transportation in a comfortable sightseeing vehicle. We've done it ourselves as a family. The kids love it. You're going to have visits to prime wildlife habitats while respecting the space that the animals need and deserve. You're going to stop at active wildlife viewing locations. One of the things I love most is the interpretation of animal behavior. The guides, with their years of experience, are going to explain to you exactly what you're seeing and why the animals are doing what they're doing. There's also opportunities for photography. Wow your friends with your personal images. There's wildlife safety education, which is hugely important, of course, and then also the local stories, insights into Jasper's history, and insights into conservation efforts as well. You can browse all of the wildlife tours available in Jasper, plus accommodations. Of course, learn more about Jasper's culinary scene, the after-hours scene, including theater, live music, festivals, and more. Basically, plan your trip today by visiting Tourism Jasper online at jasper.travel. We'll link to that in the show notes. Again, that's jasper.travel. It is an amazing time of year to get out to Jasper and make your own MyJasper memories. If you do so, we'd love to hear about them. You can hashtag MyJasper and Real Talk RJ on Instagram, and you could see your family's adventure featured in an upcoming edition of MyJasper Memories, presented Wednesdays right here on Real Talk from our incredible friends at Tourism Jasper. I had a note from somebody yesterday, Johnny. Somebody reached out, sent us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com, and they said, with the Real Talk road trip Calgary in the books, they said, please tell us your next stop is Jasper. And I let them know, with all the infrastructure now in-house, with the learnings that we gained from our time at the National Music Center down in Calgary, I would humbly suggest, I would prognosticate that a trip out to Jasper might be in the cards in the next number of months. Who knows?
It'd be
we shall
nice.
have to wait and see.
Nice relaxing
Wouldn't that be
week
good?
Instead of, it's kind of the stark contrast to brutal dude. Like the Stampede was just like, volume on 12.
Bit of a different vibe. Have you ever seen a bear on the side of the road? Have you ever seen a bear out in the wild?
Yes, and we've talked about my issues with, being a vegan for over a decade. I was always like, we're in touch with the animals. I'm going to get closer. Remember Elk Island? I ran up to a bison.
The bear is like, I am not vegan, brother.
We went to Elk Island once. If you're an avid Real Talk listener, you remember 2 years ago we showed the video where I was trying to get close to it and it rushed me.
It's a bad idea.
Yeah. So now I just, some chatters are saying in the chat as well, it's best to observe from far away, and especially with things like bears and stuff like that, you don't even want to go close. Yeah.
Have you seen I know that everyone's algorithms are different, so maybe not everybody has seen this, but there's a video that's making the rounds right now. It's a guy, and I'm not laughing at it. It's not funny at all. But a guy, I guess he's in his 80s, and he was in Yellowstone National Park, and he got too close to a bison, and the thing just absolutely tossed him, and he went up he's probably, I saw the video, he's probably 15 feet in the air.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It came crashing down.
They turned on a dime.
Oh, man.
The video I had.
The strength is crazy.
I was moving so slowly because I wasn't trying to spook him or get a video, right? I was just trying to get a little closer, take another photo.
Yeah.
And he just turned on a dime and started rushing. And I was like, that's it. Day's over.
Yeah, no kidding. I wanted to get to comments that Real Talkers had following our conversation with Anne Shibata Casselman. Really interesting conversation. If you're just joining our stream, on Canada's north, on the Arctic, and how it needs defending, and basically Canada's not ready. It was a bit of a wake-up call for sure. SLMS says, this is where I get lost in these conversations, says, I wish I would have paid more attention in social studies. Les says, the problem with shipping through the Arctic, there's not just one path. You can't just build a port. It's not like the Panama Canal. Others are pointing out, there was a good comment here from Van Ryder fan who says the melting ice makes transit through the Northwest Passage harder, not easier, right? Les wondering if we have a Coast Guard up north. Good question. Lightning Rod saying, I'm not sure if people are aware of this or not, but the Arctic is freaking cold. Some of you sharing your personal experiences from being up there, and or at least from your desire to learn more about it. A lot of you I know are sort of kind of getting into the minutia of what Anne was talking about, and some of you are sort of thinking bigger picture for sure. And then there's a lot of talk about media bias. And sometimes, Johnny, when I'm doing an interview, I'm not studying what's happening in the chat, and it feels to go off on a tangent. And I tried to trace back why people are talking about media bias, why people are going off. And then I think a big part of that is that people are starting to talk about climate change and global warming and the changing face of the reality of the Arctic and the like.
I think the argument started with something about consensus. And I always hear this argument too, where if you're talking about, for example, health things during COVID or climate change, people will say, well, there was consensus, ages ago that the earth was flat and people were wrong. Well, the difference back then is you didn't have thousands and thousands of pages and articles and websites and research documents from scientists in real time that can fact check each other and all this stuff. So consensus nowadays is a lot more closer, or I would say truth, than back in the day when we looked up at the stars.
Those scientists are all getting paid by George Soros, man.
Are they?
Oh yeah, man.
You know what?
Oh yeah, I had read that on Facebook.
Whenever I hear that, I just think I don't know. Thousands of people don't wake up every day and go to a job where they're underpaid if they don't, if they aren't passionate about what they do and want to make a change. And so when medical professionals, scientists, all these people who dedicate their lives to one single thing, and then somebody's like, well, you're a paid whatever. I'm like, dude, this guy spent 50 years, It's like I was talking to a pediatric oncologist within the last 6 months. I don't remember exactly when, but he was talking about how it just absolutely drove him nuts. The people that insist that there is a cure for cancer out there, but it's being covered up. Oh yeah.
And he was visibly agitated and was like, you're telling me that thousands of people know that there's a cure to cancer, but they're watching kids die from cancer to cover it up all for some play so that the share price will be worth more. It's like,
I mean, I was obsessed with this stuff back in the early 2000s too. I've said this before. I used to watch early Alex Jones before he had the talk show. He would just make videos on YouTube. And I was obsessed with like Illuminati and the secret plots and everything. But nowadays it's just, there's no way thousands of people could be involved in a secret without it leaking nowadays. Like with cameras and the internet and instant news happening, it's impossible for these things that people believe in. I'm sorry to say this. I know there's someone out there listening right now who's just like,
well, you don't want to
chemtrails and Illuminati and all these things. It's just impossible to not see a picture, have a document leaked, an email. It's impossible.
Did you see what the Columbia Sportswear guy, the founder of Columbia Sportswear, like the outerwear company, has said that if flat earthers can prove that the earth is flat to him beyond a shadow of a doubt, he will hand over the keys to the company. And he's done all these videos. You guys should check it out on Columbia's Instagram or just Google Columbia founder flat earth. You'll see it. And he's like, the keys to the castle are yours. He's like, we will give you all of our assets. You can have the company if you can prove that the earth is flat. It's pretty entertaining stuff. Back to our feedback, your feedback to us.
If the earth is flat, I'll run off it. Okay, Real Talkers?
I mean,
I'm done here.
Now that I'm bringing on the flat earth stuff, it's kind of funny. There was a flat earth conference in Edmonton.
I know.
It was like 5 or 6 years ago, and people were like, well, why don't you have a debate on the show? Jesperson's too much of a pussy. He won't have he's too afraid. He won't have a debate. And I was like, listen, for my pure entertainment, like I would be all over that debate. I would love to have that debate. I would be moderating it. And again, it would be a biased moderator for obvious reasons. But you know what? And we did look into it because there was a speaker coming to the Flat Earth. We did look into it. And there was a speaker from the Flat Earth Conference that was willing to come on, and we couldn't get a serious person to come on and debate them. Like the serious people were like, I'm not interested in this. I'm not interested in this exercise.
I also think serious people have empathy. Like I always hear people, why don't they do news stories on X or Z, Y or Z? What we're talking about here, conspiracy theories, chemtrails, all these other things. And I say, you know what they do? They do news and research and articles on stuff like cloud seeding, which we know is a real thing. It's just that, like, I think researchers, scientists, reporters, journalists, they have empathy where, like, it would almost be embarrassing to bring someone on and then show them, why they're wrong for an hour. It would also be a waste of time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's also just, I don't know. I mean, it would probably get a lot of clicks. Like if we're going to be cynical at the end of the day, it would get a lot of clicks. I just don't know that we would come across looking very good but you know what? I'll take that back, and I appreciate that you invoke the word empathy.
Because I don't know how I could sit there and have someone on who we know is categorically wrong, and then the whole show is just to get them. Like it seems like a waste of time.
You don't want to bring someone in and just punch down.
What is the point of that? It's no one's getting smarter, no one's getting any info they can't get anywhere else, and you're just kind of beating down on someone who may, I don't know. I'm not gonna say anything more. It's fine to research. Like I said, when I was younger, I was into all that stuff. I was like, and somebody in here was like, Alex Jones used to be cool. He actually was a guy back in the day who just asked questions, right? Uh-huh. And then he turned into this guy who tried to state facts. And then, of course, down the road, the whole thing with Sandy Hook, that's what absolutely destroyed him, right? But I don't mind asking questions. I don't mind people who ask questions.
Yeah, I mean, his take on Sandy Hook was and is deplorable.
When you start stating things as facts,
I mean, even just the whole thing about like the parents are actors, and this. I mean, if you're a parent, this just had your child murdered in cold blood, mass murder. I mean, I don't even want to think about. I don't want to get into that right now. That's going to ruin my day.
This is a great way to end what I thought was an incredibly insightful
really
interview from
How did
our
we go
friend
to Alex
Casselman.
Jones? We went to Alex Jones in like 90 seconds.
Like when you said the Arctic, I was like, oh man, I got to go find some, I got to prep for this because I don't know a lot about the Arctic and our sovereignty there and the challenges we're facing. I've read some articles and things, but I think we needed another hour because Anne was opening all the doors and showing me all the things I needed to learn.
You know about her too is like her real skill is like as a long form writer, like a long form journalist, is she invests in the story. Like this is what we talked about this yesterday, the value of investigative reporting, investigative journalism, when we talked to you about the story involving Jeff Rath. By the way, several of you reached out to let us know, and I'm assuming that this is true. I've not heard from Mr. Rath himself. We received a number of notes saying that Mr. Rath, unfortunately, it sounds like within the last week or so, lost his wife to cancer. If that is the case, obviously we offer our deepest sympathies, our condolences, and our thoughts are with the Rath family, and in particular, Jeff Rath. It's tough timing for him because he's being dragged right now in the media, and he's not offering comment on it. But I did want to acknowledge that and put that on the record, that if that is indeed the case, in the spirit of empathy and humanity, we want to offer our condolences there. But we talked to you yesterday about the value of investigative journalism, and in this case, too, long-form journalism. So Anne flies into Cambridge Bay last August, and the piece comes out here just a couple of weeks ago, right? Like she spent months working on this piece and talking to different people, stakeholders. Yeah, you get up there and you want to talk to the politicians, you want to talk to the members of the military that can go on the record, but you also want to talk to the average ordinary folks, like the residents there. You want to talk to the person that's couch surfing because in a hamlet of 560 homes, 160 families are waiting for affordable housing. Like that's an astronomical number. What did she say? Like, people want to have, you look at different grocery prices, and I know you'll see like, Coca-Cola was like, like $14, up in Rankin Inlet or Cambridge Bay or wherever the case is. And people kind of go, whatever, they lack sympathy. But you talk about the essentials that people need, right? Pampers, like diapers, milk. You want to talk about like proteins, produce, if people are going to eat healthy. It's just, I don't even know. I saw a number of comments in our chat, people saying, I don't even know how people afford to live up there. Like, I don't even know how it's possible. Just a completely different way of life. And I'm so grateful that Anne came on to help us understand the reality up there as well. I know a lot of you were talking about just the value of that conversation and how much you're taking away for it. The old goat, by the way, says living up north is like living in the 1960s. Less people, less noise.
I was listening to this. I was watching some of the videos. I was looking at pictures this morning. I was like, man, if I could just be a mailman in the Arctic, life would be so serene. It would be so peaceful.
Dude, until you're being chased by a polar bear.
There's a little adventure every now and then. This life sounds great to me. If shout out to Canada Post if they've got an opening up there. Send me.
There you go. Maybe. You see WestJet's flight attendants. I don't know why. Canada Post. I think of the strike, and I think of Air Canada. You see WestJet's employees, WestJet's flight attendants are perilously close to job action. They want to get the same deal that the Air Canada flight attendants got a while ago. The old goat goes on to say, by the way, governments can keep secrets for thousands of years. Maybe that's a reference to Area 51 or something else. D-Grade says if somebody never left Saskatchewan for their entire life, they could probably get away with thinking that the earth is flat. Alberta Girl says the northern diamond mines are going broke. The Northwest Territories government's going to end up paying for that reclamation, but nobody's talking about that. You're talking about cloud seeding. People are getting all over that as well. And a lot of you are talking about they're manipulating the weather. Yeah. I see Metamodern's comments here on jacking off. I appreciate that. JAQ, jacking off. I think it was off the top of my head. It was Professor Jacking Off. You didn't think I was going to talk about jacking off on the show today?
Stop.
Professor Timothy Caulfield came on here before, and he talked about jacking off, JAQ, just asking questions. And he was saying that's one of the things, I think he was talking about it, if I remember correctly, in the context of Joe Rogan, and how that kind of drives him crazy when interviewers that maybe should know better go, well, we're just asking questions. We're just asking questions. I do think that that's a gray area, though, because in some areas we should just ask questions. We should. But I guess, when we say where do we draw the line, number one, basic human decency is probably a good parameter, but I'm up for that debate. I'm up for that debate for sure. Many of you are also sharing your personal issues and your favorite conspiracy theories. My gut's telling me to steer clear of that right now, because I think that we're going to go down a rabbit hole and then we're going to wake up and it's going to be 3 hours later.
The chatters are deciding, but there's a lot of good ones, Ryan.
Didn't we talk about
chemtrails is my favorite.
Dedicating an entire episode to pure conspiracy theories.
But yeah,
it would get a million views.
But then we just talked about how it would be a waste of time, and anyone we brought on to be that expert, we'd have to be like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, and there's also really no way to prove or disprove some of these things. right? Like somebody's convinced that the Earth is flat, so we would say, well, show us the photos of the end of the Earth.
Aliens.
Right? Somebody may have photos of aliens. You never know.
Don't we? We've argued about this before, too, on the show.
Oh, I believe in aliens 100%.
I know, and I'm on the other side.
Yeah.
I think there's life out there. I just don't think I don't think it's possible for it to get here.
Why?
Just, I could show you some YouTube videos. No, I'm just kidding. But
you know what we do?
As far as we can see, light years away, like galaxies and galaxies.
They're walking among us.
An unthinkable amount of stars and possibly inhabitable places. There's never been a sign of life, Ryan. A single cell out there other than this planet we live on.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I also see our buddy Mark Doran in the chat. And Mark Doran says, you know what we need, Jespo? We need an episode on the need for anti-SLAPP lawsuits in Alberta. These sort of SLAPP lawsuits, basically it's the threat of legal action to basically silence. It could be silencing anybody, but for the most part, silencing journalists and commentators. Mark, I'm very happy to let you know that literally the next episode of Real Talk, I'm talking about tomorrow. So if you're listening to us on Wednesday, the 15th of July, when we're recording this, if you're listening to it later, you're going to be looking for our July 16th episode. We're going to be talking to Luke Lebrun from Press Progress. If you go to antislappalberta.ca, that's slap with 2 P's, antislappalberta.ca, you'll see an open letter from signed by Canadian journalists, digital media creators, writers, members of civil society organizations, labor unions, academia, the legal community, and other citizens whose lives' work is dedicated to advancing the public interest through our respective fields, calling for anti-SLAPP legislation in Alberta. And I am also proud to let you know that if you look there under media organizations, you can see Relay has signed on, and individual journalists there. I am Ryan Jesperson from Real Talk, having signed this open letter calling for anti-SLAPP legislation in the province. Again, you can check out antislappalberta.ca. And Mark and everybody else that's interested, join us in our next episode of the show where we'll be talking to Luke Lebrun. So I think that's going to be a good one. We did have, I think it was Darren I saw in our live chat as well that said, hey, one benefit of living up north, he wasn't sure. He framed it in the form of a question, but was wondering if, will there be or would there be as many mosquitoes up in that part of Canada as there are right now. If you missed it, our most recent episode of the show, we kind of went off, mostly because I was bitching about just an incredibly challenging, and I'm talking about mental duress, a challenging situation. The mosquito population right now is absolutely bonkers. In our neck of the woods, I recognize we have listeners and audience members from across Canada and around the world, but in our neck of the woods, in particular in this part of Alberta, the thunderstorms and the rainfall has been nuts. In the month of June, Edmonton in particular set a record for rainfall by the mid-second week of June. It had shattered. So it's done nothing but rain. That means that the ground is saturated. Many people have experienced basements flooding multiple times. I feel your pain. We had to replace our sump pump. I think I told you, Johnny, at our house, and the guy that does the work for us had to go to 3 or 4 different locations because sump pumps are sold out everywhere. Everybody's leveling up. Even here at the historic Mercer warehouse where our Real Talk studio is, just across from Rogers Place, I saw a wild video. Our friends at the Druid, the bar just below us, had water pouring in their door a few days ago. They had the mop and the bucket out. I mean, it's just wild, right?
I mean, we missed this whole thing because we were in Calgary, but I was seeing the videos going up on social media, and I was like, same thing we talked about at the start of the week here. I was talking about how much it's a weird amount of rain we've had this year, but it's a good thing. And, well, not if you don't like mosquitoes. But anyways, we went about the mosquitoes thing yesterday. But when we got back from Calgary on Saturday, I drove back, and in the evening, I got caught in this thing. I don't know what was going on. 5 p.m., or maybe 3:30, 4 p.m., I'm driving from St. Albert back to downtown, and all of a sudden, just the hardest rain I've ever experienced, I think, in Edmonton. You couldn't see, wipers on full, no hail. Like at the point where you think it's going to hail, it's raining so hard. And the wind, and then all of a sudden the streets within, I would say 10 minutes are all flooded.
Yeah, it's wild.
And I was like, I have not experienced this I don't think the whole time I've lived here.
It's tough to see as well, some of the aftermath, but if you're an arborist right now, business is good because so many trees are coming down. It's crazy. Some of the really big, the magnificent ones are the ones where like it just punches you in the gut. You know, this tree's like 80, 100 years old and down it comes in these storms. But I did want to update Real Talkers and just remind you of the power of this platform and the power of your involvement based on our off-the-cuff, unplanned, spontaneous conversation about mosquitoes and mosquito control in our most recent episode where I mused about running to be Edmonton's next mayor or maybe the next premier of Alberta exclusively on an aerial mosquito attack platform.
Jesus.
That's about it. You know, people would say, Jesperson, how do you feel about, diversifying Alberta's economy or what are your thoughts on an Alberta sales tax? I am a one platform candidate, and that is aerial mosquito assault. It did resonate with Ward Nakota Iska councillor Reed Clark, who is a regular listener to this program and reached out to let me know, Jespo, when we're back in session in August, when Edmonton City Council reconvenes, he says, I'm considering making a motion to get mosquito spraying back in Edmonton. Your lobbying worked. He says you can feel free to share on air. Councillor Clark is taking it under serious consideration.
Okay.
And he wants to free the people and especially the golfers. That from Councillor Clark out of Ward Nakota Iska.
You golfers.
Yeah.
You golfers, man.
That's right.
You want all the land. You want to kill all the mosquitoes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You want 2 days a week off.
Go on. This all sounds great. This all sounds perfect. It all sounds great. And then you want to talk about community. Look at this. Always Rolsa throws $7 into the super chat.
Oh, thank you.
Just to make a note that they're missing super chat Ken today. They said I did see him.
notice.
And then all of a sudden in pops super chat and says, I'm always here, guys. I'm just listening while I'm working. This community, it just blows my mind.
Some people have lives, but they keep us in their ear. With the world's smallest Bluetooth headphone just so their boss can't see.
There's a lot of people here that are blown away. They're actually, I don't know if I'm going to say they're troubled, but they're blown away that you don't believe in aliens.
Oh, God, I don't want to get into this.
I
put up, we can't put links in the chat, but there's and I don't mean to reference a video on YouTube, but it's by it's by researchers, scientists. There's this thing called the Fermi
Soros scientists?
No.
Oh, okay.
They basically break down really complicated science, based research and theories and all these things so that you can kind of understand it. And there's visuals, and I like to use it when I don't understand things fully. And one of them is called the Fermi paradox, and it's basically how there's like these walls of separation that prevent us from seeing life on other planets. Things like light years away, we can't travel like that, and different solar systems and the sheer how we think of aliens as like us, right? Like human like feature,
sure.
Big head, big eyes, but they could be creations or instances of existence that we can't even fathom, that we couldn't even communicate with. You know what I mean? We always think of them as human looking or whatever.
For sure.
But anyways, the video called Where Are All the Aliens? If you go look it up, it just kind of explains that there's too many walls of separation, and even if some form of life got through them all and came to Earth and was like, "Hey, I'm here," it would not be good for us. It would not be good for us. Anything that powerful would likely use us in the same way we monetize and use the lower species below us here on Earth, right?
The species we perceive to be lower, yes.
You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying.
They wouldn't just come here and be like, "Hey, here's the secret
Maybe they
to
would
energy."
be. It would also probably matter. It would matter who they met first.
It's going to be bad.
Right? If they met like a salt of the earth, like a farmer outside Humboldt, Saskatchewan, with a big open heart welcomes them into their home, and versus if they meet Donald Trump first,
I think it's
going
to be like the Matrix. Like we're going to be batteries for them, some form of energy they're gonna use.
By the way, Camel skipping, good to see you, Camel, in the live chat, powered by Park Power. By the way, I just got an update on this. I wanted to pass this along to Real Talkers. I know that this is going to sound like a commercial because it kind of sort of is, but we're also looking for ways to save you money. I just heard from the team at Park Power, they got a new lower rate plan for electricity and natural gas. Get this, fixed electricity rates as low as 6.85 cents per kilowatt hour. That is wild. Extremely competitive against the large incumbent utility companies. You can learn more at parkpower.ca/realtalk. But Camel Skipping says, Beyond the Curve, if you want to read or seek to learn more, rather, about the flat earth community, Beyond the Curve is a great documentary. And SLMS is not so sure that we need to do a special episode on conspiracy theories. Says actually, please don't. There's enough of those platforms around. We need more intellect, not less.
That's true, but if everyone was just super smart, like we need contrast in life. We need more than black and white. We need all the shades in between. And if anything, I think conspiracy theories, like, look at us. We just, for 30 minutes, it's entertainment.
Well, the odd one might prove to be true.
It is fun to think about sometimes that there are magical things out there beyond our comprehension, or that,
Yeah.
Why do we watch movies about secret, societies
we like escape.
Running the world? It's great to think about, and it needs to be out there. It's just people get too entrenched.
Odds and Sods says, if aliens can get here, we are the equivalent of ants to them and probably
100.
not worth their notice.
100.
Justin says, I also don't think they've been to Earth, but statistically, there's got to be intelligent life out there somewhere. I 100% agree.
People say that, but we haven't seen a single cell.
But that's such
a single.
No, but based on what? Our primitive exploration? We just found out how to get a rover to Mars. Like, we just went around the moon.
We have
we
telescopes. We have data that shows light years away.
But
tons of galaxies. We haven't seen a blip, Ryan, a movement of any kind.
What do you think it's the same thing having grown up in the religious or faith community, where you are taught to believe that your religion is the right religion and all other religions are basically pathways to hell, to eternal damnation. And you sit there and you go, gosh, am I ever lucky to have been born into the most wonderful country on earth, into the one true religion? And you go through your life, sort of believing that to be true. How realistic is it that of all the planets in the entire universe, that there's only one with intelligent life, and we so happen to be born on that planet? I don't believe it for a second.
Just an incredible chance thing happening. A big bang, a close star like the sun, and just the right amount of distance from it. It was just a whole bunch of factors that no other galaxy we see has, that created this beautiful place we're on. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm also thankful we haven't met aliens, because when we do, Ryan,
they come in peace.
You're gonna be feeding them grapes and waving a leaf
from Friesen Brothers
to keep them cool.
Darren says
the earth is so hot from climate change.
Darren says, I think one of the only ways humanity spreads beyond our social system will be as self-replicating robots or AI, and we could spread in a relatively short amount of time, as it would be exponential. Others are asking if we could do something on lizard people.
Are these the shapeshifter people? Yeah, that's. Yeah.
By the way, our resident home inspector Noob reminding everybody to run your downspouts and your rain barrel overflows as far away from your foundations as possible. Noob says you want 6 inches of grading drop over 10 inches or 10 feet. 6 inches of grading drop over 10 feet from your house, and clean your gutters.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as the rain was I was like, I would hate to be a town. You know those end townhouses, the ones on the end that have more foundation showing? Their sub pumps must have just been running on overtime
nonstop,
the last
right?
2 weeks, right?
Nonstop. Others are, Emily G points out that aliens just don't want anything to do with us right now, which may be true. Mark says Ryan's mosquito platform for mayor would create quite a buzz. Nice one, Mark. I like that. Shiloh, I guess, is going to vote for me no matter what. Says, way to go, Ryan. Bring back the spray helicopters. Oh, yeah. We're going like full on. It's going to be like apocalypse now on mosquitoes when I am elected mayor. Unfortunately, we are going to have to close the rec centers. We're going to have to charge tolls on all of the highways, and we're going to have to stop any LRT expansion, because we're going to be diverting all of our funds to eviscerating mosquitoes. But Alberta proved that it is true, it is possible to eradicate rats once and for all, and we're going to endeavor to do the exact same with mosquitoes. If you could offer visitors or would-be Albertans a mosquito and wasp-free paradise Just think of what our population would do. Just like Premier Danielle Smith predicted, we would get Red Deer to 1 million residents, John, in short order, before you would believe it. Steph M is with you, says, I don't believe in aliens either. I need proof. So many conspiracies. You guys want to feel the nail marks in the hands.
It's not that I don't believe in aliens. I think it's kind of a lost cause because I don't believe, at least in my lifetime, or I don't believe we're ever going to interact with them. And if we do, it will be bad. And if they are that above us, there's no reason for them to come here. We're the most primitive little, compared to them, we got nothing to offer. And if we did, I think they'd come here and exploit it.
Fanny Plack Fletch says, Johnny, what if this alien species has never known the concept of hate or power or warfare?
I mean, that's the thing. Do you ever think about things that are so vast and then your mind just goes,
yeah.
And there's like this cloud that your eyes kind of cross and you're like, I don't understand. Every single thing on the planet, from a little cell, a worm, everything, they may not know hate and war, but they know survival instincts, right? Every species of anything is out there every day trying to survive. And I think aliens would still have that primitive instinct. And I don't think if they looked at us, they'd be like, yeah, these guys are chill. No, yeah. I think they'd be like, these guys use, abuse,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Buston says concentrated garlic spray works wonders. It does. I want to shout out my buddy Stu McGregor, his beautiful new bride, Amanda.
It's great on vampires.
They were married in Brooks, Alberta over the weekend. And we got a note from one of the groomsmen, my good buddy Chivers, who sent us a note. He said, you guys make sure you bring bug spray because the ceremony's outside. It couldn't have been a better day. It was like 30 degrees. It's unbelievable. And he said, make sure you bring bug spray. So we show up to the wedding. We show up to the ceremony. Not a bug. Not a mosquito. Now, there was a bit of a breeze, which helps out a little bit. But I walked up to the groom after. He's worked in ag. He's a good Brooks boy. He knows what's up. And I said, no mosquitoes. What's up? He goes, his brother and him, they spent the evening spraying the field with this garlic spray, and he swears by it. So, I mean, I'm just going to say, I
thought you meant like you got to spray it on yourself. I was like,
no.
Especially at a wedding. I don't know if I do that.
No. They sprayed the whole field apparently, or at least the areas that we were going to be in.
That sounds like a way to like push them out.
Yeah.
Without affecting the whole web of life. I'd be down with that.
I'm not worried about eviscerating mosquitoes. I mean, bees are a different conversation.
You're a general. You've got the hat on. You're like,
the
war on mosquitoes.
Like Super Chat Ken says right now, Jespo loves the smell of mosquito napalm in the morning, and I do. And I recognize the Robert Duvall quote, but I love the smell of mosquito napalm 24/7.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Do I not get out enough? I mean, I've done a few weddings outside in open air venues already this year. I haven't had a real problem with mosquitoes, and I always do a little bit of bug spray all over the outfit, but I haven't really had it yet. I think you're in the areas where maybe
I think it's my blood.
Well, also golf courses have like pools of water where
but I was even on the golf course
for sure,
with a buddy, and he was just totally copacetic. Not a single mosquito. And
That's weird.
Swarmed. I think it's something in my. I don't know what it is. Mosquitoes must love bourbon. I don't know.
I think the less animals you eat, the no, I'm just kidding.
Hey, let's get to some housekeeping here. First of all, Tracy, before you take off, Tracy says my team tells me it's time for a birthday walk to keep us all happy. Tracy, happy birthday, and thank you so much for spending part of your birthday with us. Alberta Girl, following up on something that Mark Doran from the Polluter Pay Federation told us about, gave us the heads up last week during our Real Talk road trip in Calgary. Says shout out to Mark for an excellent Warburg surface rights meeting last night. Says the data center presentation should be up next on Real Talk, and Carol Edwards would be a great guest. Guys, if you're ever going to make suggestions on guests or subject matter, make sure, I appreciate you doing it in the chat. Send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. I have the attention span of, similar to one of those mosquitoes that I'm going to eviscerate. And so emails are way better. Our team member Katie makes sure to star the good ones, and we love to follow up on that. We want to give the people what they want. And obviously we want to do more work on that data center. If you missed it last week, we talked to Premier about it. We talked to Sturgeon County Mayor Alana Nachu about it. We talked to former Premier Allison Redford about it. They're all in the pro camp. They're all happy about it, acknowledging that there are some concerns. But obviously, when you interview a premier or a mayor or a CEO or somebody like that, you don't just go, okay, well, that's great. Thanks for telling us this, and we'll leave it at that. We're going to continue to dig and seek to learn more, and so we appreciate that. I also have some housekeeping that I wanted to cover. We had some questions, Johnny, about why our live chat disappears when our episodes get trimmed. And so I want to get to that. I'm going to cover that in just a second. But before we do, I have to let you know that this episode is happening with support from our friends at the Ranch Golf and Country Club, offering you a no mosquito guarantee.
What?
Okay, that part's not exactly true, but I will say that nobody does better at getting rid of standing water than the team at the ranch. I've seen it. They have a series of pumps and hoses, and I mean, their team is on it. You know, that's why the ranch has earned accolades as Alberta's best public golf course. It's why we are proud to make the ranch the home of the annual Real Talk Golf Classic. It is 18 minutes from downtown Edmonton. It's basically the first exit west out of Edmonton city limits. You can book your tee time today or ask for their tournament package application. It's not too late to get your tournament registered for this summer. I mean, the schedule is filling up fast, but they do still have some openings. You can connect with the team at the ranch. Let them know that Real Talk sent you when you visit theranchgolf.com. If you're traveling internationally or maybe flying into Edmonton, if your travels will take you through Edmonton International Airport, that's YEG, make sure you're getting rewarded at yegplus.com/realtalk. This is Canada's first airport loyalty rewards program. Every time you spend $1 at YEG, you earn a point. You spend $100, you earn 100 points. The more points that you collect, the more levels and benefits you unlock. That includes things like free baggage wrap. Maybe you're taking your backpack over to Europe. You need to get it wrapped. No cost for that. Free parking and more. Again, you can sign up for YEG Plus today at yegplus.com/realtalk. The Edmonton Chamber of Commerce had a huge presence down at the Calgary Stampede last week. It was amazing to see them out there spreading the message of Alberta's Metro Edmonton region, in particular the business owners and operators. Our chamber membership is our business's most valuable investment, and that includes the events that they put on, including an upcoming 12-week AI intensive, practical AI for small business workshops, and a city councilor budget engagement series. They also have coming up on the 21st of July, Coffee with the Chamber at K-Days, presented by Explore Edmonton. Learn more and sign up for membership today by visiting edmontonchamber.com. I'm going to be connecting with our friends at North Road Investment Council later today. Very much looking forward to that. They have a message that I think everybody needs to hear, and that is that when most people think of the financial industry, you know, they probably don't realize that you could be working with a financial planner. You feel like your bases are covered, but behind the scenes, your investment management is actually being outsourced to a different firm. Yeah, it happens. And that means that you're paying twice. And of course, that adds up. And that's why North Road Investment Council does it differently. They bring financial planning and investment counsel together under one roof, so your strategy is not split across separate providers. So whether you're looking right now for a second opinion or a full financial roadmap, don't overcomplicate it and definitely don't overpay for it. With North Road Investment Council, you'll get the advice you need when you need it, and you'll stay in control of the journey ahead. You can connect with Marshall and Carrie and the team by visiting northroadic.com. You know, every time they're on the show, we learn something. We learn how to keep more money in our pockets. We learn how to better plan for our future. And Marshall will be back with us a week from today. That's the 22nd of July. Marshall McAllister from North Road Investment Council, online at northroadic.com. And before we get to explaining why you can't watch our live chat on Real Talk episodes after the live stream ends, I also wanted to give you a heads up that coming up this Friday on the show, it's our Real Talk Roundtable on the 17th of July, featuring three of the huge difference makers at UCAN Youth Services. This is a community roundtable. We're going to learn more, and some of it's going to be tough to hear, about the need for this relentless program. This is a program that provides critical and in many cases life-saving supports for young people aged 12 to 17. These are young people that have seen violence and trauma. They've been exploited. They've been involved in gangs. They've seen crisis firsthand. Well, the funding has been interrupted for the Relentless program, and that means that the services are under threat. We're doing everything we can to save this. It's a crisis campaign, so don't miss a special episode of the show coming up on the 17th of July. That's this Friday. And if you feel compelled and if you're able, please do consider supporting the Relentless program with a donation today by visiting youcan.ca. That's youcan.ca. Darren says, Jespo, Johnny, you guys are great, sure, but the live chat is why we're here. Preserve the chat.
Yeah, but it's
Let me
live,
tell
and
you
that's
something.
what's great
It's
about
live.
it.
So
Like,
here's my
nobody wants to
thinking
read
in
it
this.
3
My
months later.
thinking in this is that our live chat is what draws our live audience to the show. This is the benefit of joining our live stream weekdays at 8:30 Mountain, 10:30 Eastern. And we've got this incredible community that gathers here. A lot of people are, referring to each other like they've known each other for years. We see it all the time. It's amazing. The very first members and our YouTube subscribers that join the chat every morning are wishing each other a good morning and asking each other how their days are going. And it's incredible to see. But the live chat is a benefit of the live tuning audience. Now, on a technical side, I saw MetaModern had a bunch of comments and questions earlier in this episode about why the live chat disappears. So we can get into the weeds for a second here and just explain to you the structure of the show. There's a reason why I saved this to the very end, because I think that some folks might lose interest. But
And we'll be trimming this.
And we will be trimming this. This will not be in the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. But MetaModern, I appreciate the questions and we're happy to shine some light on it, but we are going to get into the weeds a little bit here. So we have our Real Talk pre-roll, right? And this is what happens at about 8:25 Mountain every morning, 10:25 Eastern every morning. You're going to see the YouTube shorts. These are like the highlights from our most recent episodes. We put that up there so you can catch the highlights you may have missed, and also so the stream can gather some people. And so when we hit the ground running at 8:30 Mountain every single morning, we've got a few hundred, or across the 7 social media platforms, thanks to our friends at California Closets, a couple of thousand people that are joining us and watching the show live. You don't want to start from scratch. You don't want to start at zero, and that's why the show doesn't hard start at 8:30 Mountain Time. But later, when you're watching on YouTube, and this is just kind of standard practice, and there's wisdom that goes into it, and I won't geek out. I guess I will a little bit and let you know that I took part. I graduated from what's called a YouTube News Creator Accelerator program a couple of years ago. It's like, I guess if you could get your MBA in YouTube or something like that. But it doesn't make sense to have a video like today's that says the Arctic needs defending, Canada isn't ready, and then people click on it, and you have about 3 seconds to secure their attention or less, and then this pre-roll goes for like 6 minutes. The episode has to start now, and that's the logic behind trimming the pre-roll off the episode after the live stream has ended. Now with YouTube, and this is outside of our control, when you trim the episode or when you edit a live stream, the live chat disappears. It evaporates. And that's a trade-off that we've had to consider. It's a decision that we had to make, and in the best interests of this show, and in particular, this show reaching as many people as possible, and our interviews having the biggest possible impact, we've made the difficult decision to sacrifice the live chat for viewing later, because we trim the top of the episodes. And so there's your explainer why. But I would say, for anybody that's really curious to participate or have a say in the live chat, join us live, and you'll be able to do it every single day.
It's a treat for you. But also from a technical standpoint, you just outlined better viewer retention, right? People clicking the replay get to the content. You see Ryan's face in like 10 seconds, but it's also better first impressions. Like, new viewers are coming to us all the time. We're constantly getting new subscribers. And if they want to click and see what the show's all about, we don't want them waiting for 5 minutes. And then the last one I'll say, which is probably obvious to everyone, the algorithm likes clean cut stuff. All right. Obviously, it's going to boost rankings, stronger audience retention, watch time, positive signals go up, all that stuff. When you click something and it goes, here's the show, instead of, and I know someone else said in there, well, this guy gets 1 million views and he has the show is starting in 10 minutes thing at the start of every one of his videos. I'll tell you what, when we get to 1 million views an episode, we'll keep the shorts on there the whole frickin' time.
We'll see. Yeah. And I will also recognize that Noob says there's always the Real Talk Discord, which is true. We call it our Real Talk community
Another
chat.
treat we want you to go to.
Another treat. And you qualify, or you gain access to the Real Talk community chat on Discord Discord. What is there? I think there's about 100 people in there now. I think. I'm not sure, but it's great, and it goes 24/7.
I check in every now
Some
and then.
people are in there all the time.
It used to be like I'd like go in every day, like laying in bed before bed, and I'll catch up. Now there's so much sub areas and plots going on. Thanks to Darren and Justin who do
They
all
do
the
such
moderating.
a good job.
That it's so specific. I love it. Like sometimes I go in there and just look at there's like a section where people are showing their pets.
Yeah.
I just go in there, or
It's called if
I
the
want to
Real
know
Talk pet chat.
if I want to know how people are feeling about politics, I'll go in there, or this or that. So
Very well organized.
It's actually incredible. And
so people are asking here, and I want to answer this question where, Cherie says, I'm curious about supporting the show via Patreon, says I haven't used it before. Steph's wondering what's the difference between Patreon and Discord. So I don't want to make this too confusing, and it's really not that confusing, but either way, whether you support us with a YouTube channel membership, the Real Deal membership on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube channel to learn more about that, or whether you support us on Patreon, and that's, you go to ryanjesperson.com, click on Connect, and just click on Patreon. Either way, you're going to gain access to the Discord chat. Discord is just the platform. That's where the chat happens. That's the Real Talk community chat. Johnny and I pop in on I think on a pretty regular basis. I pop in as often as I'm able. Share some insights, some kind of behind the scenes peeks. We'll show you some photos that we've seen. I mean, we make it worth people's while, and it's where you can ask us questions, and we try to answer as many questions as we can. That's a benefit of membership on Patreon or on the YouTube Real Deal level. There's also other benefits we've given away this year alone. We've obviously had some mixers in real life. We've had some election or debate night watch parties. If you support us on Patreon, you get a pair of limited edition Real Talk socks, which I absolutely love, and other exclusive Real Talk merch. We've given away tickets to Edmonton Opera. We've given away courtside seats to the Edmonton Stingers, club seats to the Edmonton Elks, courtesy of our friends at Play Alberta, and we have more of those coming along. So we always do. Listen, this is a business. This is how we feed our families. This is how we keep the lights on. We appreciate everybody that supports us whenever you can. Some of you write messages into the show and you say, I can't afford to support the show financially, but just wanted to send you a note of encouragement. That fills our bucket like you wouldn't believe. We appreciate those of you that support us in whichever way you can, whether that's where you buy your car, where you buy your clothing, who you go to for your internet, electricity, and natural gas, who you go to for your custom closets, who you go to for your solar panels, and so much more. When you let these Real Talk partners, our sponsors, know that you're supporting them because you heard about it on the show. You heard about them on the show. That means the world to us. I'm thrilled to let you know I had a wonderful meeting yesterday with Chad Helm at the Helm Clothing, and we're going to be working together for another year. So a big shout out to the team at the Helm Clothing for re-upping with Real Talk as well. A reminder, the promo code Real Talk, all one word, will take 10% off your order at thehelmclothing.com. We got a ton to get to, plus I'm about to go host a golf tournament. So practically, I've got to get the hell out of here. That means it's a perfect time to wrap. And as you embark on your day, Real Talkers, we want to thank you for supporting this show. Thanks for telling your friends about it. Thanks for asking us how you can continue to support the show. And thank you for keeping us topped up with great segment ideas. Again, talk@ryanjesperson.com is the best place to reach us. If you want to continue this conversation, leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, and we'll be back at it exactly 22 hours from right this minute, talking about anti-slap legislation in the province. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.